right. So today we're going to talk about a technology called Scully, and which is something that enables Angular developers to embrace the Jamstack more easily. I'm going to try and explain a little bit about what the Jamstack is, and I'm going to go light though because I really want to show people how easy Scully is to add into Angular projects. So that's kind of my main goal here. So to start, the first question I hear a lot is, when you talk about the Jamstack, people don't know what the Jamstack is. If I asked you to turn to the person next to you and explain the Jamstack, a lot of us wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm going to try and do a high-level explanation of the Jamstack and just some of the benefits it can bring us as Angular developers. So the Jamstack is about taking any website, not just JavaScript websites, but really any, and pre-rendering and caching all of the views. So in Angular, that means going to each route, pre-rendering it out so that it's already been rendered, and then saving that to a file. It also means caching as many of the API calls as we can, so that when we ship the app to production, any of the data that's going to be the same, that's not going to be changing, we can have those cached so we don't have to make those calls in production. And then the last kind of main important part is not shipping that is not serving that from your own servers, but serving it out from a CDN, and really embracing kind of the global distribution network that you get with a CDN. If you're serving up pre-rendered views and cached calls to your users, that'll be the fastest possible version of your website that you could get. And I kind of want to make a really bold statement. I've worked on quite a few large Angular apps, quite a few large enterprise apps, and I really believe that there's no amount of optimization that we can do as front-end engineers that will increase the performance as much as just really embracing the Jamstack will. And I've worked on giant apps where we embraced lazily loading images and lazily loading libraries and lazily loading as much of the app as we could. And none of that ever showed the type of monetary gains and user satisfaction that we've seen from pre-rendering and just really embracing the Jamstack API. So as far as your users being able to tell a difference, the Jamstack will make the biggest change. In your users' perception of your app. So, kind of at the high-level explanation of Jamstack being, pre-rendering your app, caching your calls, and then shipping that out to a CDN. So, how does Scully fit into that? So, Scully, some people call us a static site generator, and we like to think of ourselves as a Jamstack toolchain. So a tool chain for Angular developers that helps you kind of embrace the Jamstack in your Angular project. And the goals of Scully are kind of the same goals of the Jamstack, but it goes a little bit further. We want to empower 100% of Angular projects to embrace the Jamstack. That's a really big goal for us. We also want to require, almost no effort to integrate. That was a big requirement for us as well. We want to support Markdown so that people can write content on sites with Markdown files. And then the last part that we wanted to provide was an ecosystem or a plugin system where we could have people write plugins but also share plugins with others so that it's really easy to kind of plug into the Scully ecosystem. So these 4 bullet points are something that Angular Universal doesn't do a great job with. And Angular Universal can help you with pre-rendering, but Scully exists to help with all 4 of these additional bullet points. And so when a lot of that's kind of the number one question we get is, what's the difference between Scully and Angular Universal if Angular Universal is capable of pre-rendering? Angular Universal doesn't do great at these bullet points. It's hard you can't get 100% of Angular projects. It requires a lot of effort. It doesn't support Markdown. It doesn't have a plugin system. So that's 4 of the reasons why Scully exists, so that we can provide Jamstack options for these 4 additional bullet points. Anyway, if you look at these two sites, it's the same site. The right is rendering with Angular with Scully. The left is rendering just Angular. And you can see the right's already done. And the left took quite a bit longer to kind of download and finish. It's about to start over. So here it started over. The left loads, you know, not immediately, but very, very quickly. The right takes a significant amount of time, significantly longer to load. It's going to start over here in a second, just so you can get it one last look. When it flashes white, okay, there it's starting over. And this is the kind of performance increase that your users will see when you work with Scully. Is they'll immediately be able to see your rendered site versus having to wait for all your JavaScript to download before they can see anything. Now, it's important to note that the website on the right here is the exact same website as on the left. We didn't have to modify the source code. There's not additional JavaScript running at runtime. Like it's a very, very minimal implementation to get Scully going on this project. But the performance increases that the users saw really, really boosted the conversion of these websites like significantly. So again, Scully provides a large amount of optimization for your users, and their perception of your performance goes up while really your website doesn't actually improve in performance, but the perceived performance is what is improving. So anyway, all right, so I'm going to do a demonstration of Scully, and I'm going to walk through a project, and I'm going to show this to everybody. We're going to add Scully. I'm going to take you through the Scully configuration. I'm going to walk you through the pre-rendering, how you would tell Scully to pre-render your site, and then how you could kind of test the pre-rendered site to see it, like, and start buggering around with it. And then lastly, we'll add a plugin just so we can see how easy it is, and we'll cache some API calls. So give me 1 second. I'm actually going to go. If you guys give me 15 seconds, I'm going to ask my kids to quiet down a little bit. They're really loud in the other room. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me go yell at these guys. Give me like 30 seconds. Hold on.
Jaha, men då provar man en öppen fråga. Är det här ungefär vad ni hade förväntat er av agendan, vad man kommer prata om? Eller vad han kommer prata om?
Ja, alltså jag hade ju pluggat lite innan så jag visste ju vad han skulle prata om. Men det var ju, det är sjukt kul att höra.
Ja. Jag tycker det är kul att han börjar med ett exempel som är lite resultatet av det som man kommer uppnå. Det ger lite intresse av att förstå vad det är för någonting.
I apologize about that. Hopefully, oh, I'm using the wrong microphone. Sorry. Is that better? It's a little bit more quiet now.
Ooh. Yeah, that's better.
It's okay. Yeah.
All right, guys. I thought I was using the right microphone. All right, now it should be a little more quiet. I apologize. Okay, sorry, that was stressful. Okay, so all right, yeah, we're gonna add Scully to a project. We'll go through the config. We'll run a pre-render with Scully. We'll poke around and we'll look at the optimizations, and then we'll add a plugin and we'll cache an API call. So I'm just gonna jump into this project. So I have a very simple Angular project here. Anyone who's built an Angular CLI app before is going to be able to recognize this project. It's very, very simple. I haven't added Scully to it yet, but if we click around and it's a donut store, so it has a list of donuts, and on the home route, and then if you click on one of these donuts, it takes you to kind of the donuts detail page where you can kind of see it. Get some nutritional facts. I scraped Krispy Kreme's website, so this is I used Puppeteer to scrape it to make myself an API because I couldn't find a donut API. But anyway, so that's kind of what's going on. When we refresh this site, like if we go back to the all site, if I do a refresh, if we look at if we look at, sorry, let me go to all of the calls. And if we look for the API calls, yeah, okay. So here's the donuts API. So it makes a call to the localhost / donuts, and this call to the localhost donuts, it returns the list of donuts. So I'm making this call at runtime to a server. I'm not making it on 4200. I'm making it on port 3000. So that's one of the changes is it's making a call to a server, and we're gonna cache that call, and just so you can kind of see, hey, we're caching calls and how that works at runtime. So anyway, when I click on this API, it goes ahead and it calls another API to get that specific donut back as an object. So we have API calls that we're going to start caching so that you can see, hey, once we get this to production, we'll get all these calls cached. So as you can see, though, very simple app, has a root route, it has a donut details route, and then the only other route that it has would be this about route that just kind of explains why are we using a donut store. It lets us have route parameters, which so we can show off some of the functionality with Scully with route parameters. It has calls, so we can add cacheable calls, and then we can add blog support if we have enough time at the end. So I'm going to add Scully to this project. There's not a lot of special magic going on in this code base. Like it's a very much just a simple Angular app that I added some donut stuff to. So yeah. So I'm gonna first let's go through. Let's go ahead and show everyone how easy it is to add Scully. So if we say ng add, and ng add is a way to have the Angular CLI add an npm package for you, but it also will run any schematics that are included in that package. So I'm going to say ng add, and we'll say Scully IO init. Okay, and this is the schematic that you'll run to add Scully into any project, and the installation process is going to go through and set up Scully inside your project. It's gonna give you the files you need and the support you need in your project so that Scully can go in. There's probably 7 or 8 steps to get Scully installed into a project, and this kind of takes care of those steps for you so that you don't have to go through like a lengthy getting started doc. All you need to do is run this schematic, and the steps will get taken care of for you. It's going to take a second to install these, so I'm going to be patient. And when it's done, it kind of gives me a summary of what happened. It made one change to our app module. It updated our polyfills. It added Scully into our package JSON. And then the real important thing is that it also added a couple scripts to our package JSON. But the real important thing is that it created our donut store config, our Scully config for this project. And that's kind of the main file I want to show off is the config file. So this is what the Scully config looks like. Out of the gate, it's pretty simple. It just wants to know where your project's located. It wants to know the name of your project, and it wants to know, hey, when I build your project, where do you want me to put the output? So a lot like the Angular CLI when you say ng build, and it will build that into dist/donut store. Scully wants to know where you want it to put its output. So we're just going to say dist/static, and you can change this to be whatever you want. Anyway, Scully is it's capable of pre-rendering some of our routes. Some of them it will skip, the ones that have route parameters. So those donut detail routes it will skip, but it's already capable of pre-rendering a large portion of our app besides the donut detail routes. But and it's actually really pretty simple to run that. So now that it's installed, notice I haven't done any additional config. In order to pre-render my Angular app with Scully, all I have to do is say npm run Scully. Now, One thing that you do have to do before you do a Scully build is you need to do an ng build first, and it can't do a build until Scully can't build until you've done an Angular build with your latest changes. So that's certainly a thing. I don't know why this is taking. I don't know why this is timing out. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna run it again. Okay. This is gonna take 20 seconds. For some reason, there's some sort of timing error on my project. It's gonna time out after 20 seconds. But if we go to our dist static, it copied our project over into the dist static directory, and then it's going to take a second. Normally I don't know what's going on with this 20-second delay. It pre-rendered our about page. It pre-rendered our home page. So I'm just going to open, I'll open up the about page just so we can see that. So if we go to static about index.html, if we format this and go to the bottom, you can see that this has the app root here, but normally the app root's totally empty inside of an Angular project. However, our app root is pretty action-packed, full of content. If you get in here and kind of look at it, it's got our header in here. It's got our router outlet with the about component rendered. It has our footer component rendered down here at the bottom. So this isn't what a normal project in Angular looks like, where it's the index.html is populated with stuff. This is what happens when you pre-render with Scully. Is it pre-rendered it and saved it out, but at the bottom it left your AngularJS files. So what this means is it's pre-rendered, but once the user sees my app, the Angular JavaScript downloads and it turns back into an Angular app. So it's pre-rendered for a second, and then it will switch back over to an Angular app. Anyway, so that's the about page. And if we look at this content with the UL and the LI, if we come back over here and we go to, oh, sorry, one thing. That's why it timed out. Maybe. Let's just serve this up real quick. Okay, so if we come back over to the local host, and if we go to that about page again, you can see it's got that UL with that LI. So so clearly this is the pre-rendered version of our Angular app. One thing I want to show, this is my ng serve. If I turn off JavaScript execution, so if I say disable JavaScript and I refresh my Angular app, notice the app doesn't run. Like nothing loads without JavaScript enabled. In a second, we'll be able to disable JavaScript, and Scully will still execute it will still download and show our app. So anyway, so now that we've built our website, I want to go ahead and serve it so that we can kind of test around and click around and see what it looks like. So let me show you the second part of Scully, which is the Scully server. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to say Scully npm run Scully serve. Now this is going to serve those static files that we just generated, right? And it's going to serve. Sorry, does someone have a question? Someone just unmuted. Okay, so it's going to serve the result of our Angular build on port 1864, but it's going to serve just the static files, basically the results of our Scully build on port 1668. So I'm going to click that. Now these two sites look very much alike. In fact, if I come over here and go to about, if you see me click my, they look mostly identical. The one on the left, this is our Angular app that hasn't been pre-rendered. Over here, this is our Angular app that has been pre-rendered. And over here now, if I disable JavaScript, now I can come over here and refresh, and you'll notice the app still loads, like they can still see it, right? And it's not because it's cached, it's just simply because it doesn't need to execute the JavaScript to run because it's been pre-rendered. And I can go to the home route, and that actually renders as well. So if you come over here, you can see I've got 2 of my routes working. And they're pre-rendered. So this is pretty cool. And again, JavaScript is disabled. So if I re-enable this, the other thing that's really interesting is if I re-enable it, it will still work with JavaScript. So I can still click on, now that I've loaded the home page, I can click on these detailed routes and it will work. If I disable JavaScript again, these detailed routes, they didn't actually get pre-rendered, and I'm going to go kind of walk you through it. Let me click on one just so you can kind of see. Without JavaScript enabled, these detailed routes don't work. So when I click on this, it says, hey, I can't find that route. So that route's basically dead. So let's kind of walk through what happened with Scully, why that route didn't get pre-rendered. Because, and this is kind of where the magic of Scully happens. So when we did our Scully build, Scully, it started and said, hey, I'm gonna import your Angular build and start the Scully servers in the background. And I'm gonna find all the routes in your application. And then it kind of gave us a warning here after it found all the routes. It's like, hey, I didn't know how to resolve this route. Like there was no configuration for the donuts/donut ID route. So I'm gonna skip that route is what it told us. So it didn't generate any of our donut ID routes. So Scully is kind of telling us, hey, you need to set up some configuration for that route. And so we're going to go ahead and do that so that Scully can then pre-render all those detail routes as well. Let me come over and in order to do that, we're going to go to our Scully config. So in your Scully config, if we have a route that we want to pre-render, we put it down in this routes config. And I'm going to say for the donut ID route, let's add some configuration for that. Now, the way that you work with Scully to help it find all of these IDs is you're going to use what's called a plugin, a router plugin. Now, there's a bunch of these that already exist. The community's built a bunch, some that integrate with Contentful, some that integrate with other CMSs, others that integrate with file systems. There's a really simple one called the Json plugin, and that will just simply do HTTP calls to JSON endpoints for you and return to you values that can be substituted into these query parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and configure the JSON plugin here. So I'm going to say type is JSON. Okay, so we're going to use the JSON plugin for this route parameter. And then I'm going to say for the donut ID, because we have to teach you how to resolve that donut ID. We just have to make this key match the query parameter Angular route. So we're going to say for that, I want you to use the URL HTTP localhost 3000 /donuts. Okay, and then that's going to give you back an array, and the ID that I want, I want to pull the property off of those results. Property I want to pull off is called ID. Okay. So this is now going to be able to resolve. This will go get an array of objects that will all have an ID on them, and then this will pull the ID off of them. Scully will then take those IDs, and it will render one page for each ID. And so it will start to pre-render all of our details routes now. And since I haven't changed any of my Angular code, I actually don't need to rebuild Angular anymore. To do this, I can now simply say, I can just rerun my Scully build. So we'll say npm run Scully. And I'm going to do the watch command, so I don't have to keep running Scully again and again. I don't know what's going on with the timing on my server, but there's some sort of timing issue in this project that I don't know what it is. It's going to take 20 seconds to render these. I apologize. I don't know which route's taking the 20 seconds, but one of these routes is. It's one of those presentation glitches. Anyway, let's give this a second. So it went ahead and rendered. It's going to render them in 16-bit chunks. It's horrible. So it's going to render them 16 at a time because my machine has 16 cores on it. So it spins up 16 pre-renders, puts them on 16 different cores. And normally this goes very fast. Normally it's not this slow. So I probably need to restart my computer or something because it's kind of got this glitch where it's not. It thinks that there's something not resolving, so it takes the full 20 seconds to pre-render every round. I'm gonna go ahead and finish the Scully build. I'm just gonna kind of kill it. Well, never mind. I'll let it finish. Give it one more second. This should be the last one. There's one more. Okay. Anyway, we don't need to wait for it to finish before we can start looking at it. Anyway, now if we go into the static directory and we go to donuts, there's a bunch of folders in here. Each one of these is pre-rendered. If I go to the dulce de leche donut and we format this, we can scroll down and we can see there's all sorts of information about the dulce de leche donut. Along with a link to get the PDF for the nutritional facts for it. Anyway, so Scully's saying, hey, I went ahead and I have, it took me 103 seconds to render 49 pages. Normally that's like 3 seconds. Normally it doesn't take any time at all, but I have some bug in my code, which I apologize to everyone for. So but it's now serving those changes over here on localhost 1668. So if we come back over to our 1668, and you'll notice we still have our JavaScript is disabled. So this app is still disabled. But it still fully works because everything in my app is just an href. So I can click on everything, and even though I don't have any none of these have nutritional facts. There we go. Some of them have. Okay. Even though I don't have JavaScript enabled, this app largely still works, and I can click on the home page and go back. But it still also works if I re-enable JavaScript. Do a refresh. I can still click around, and it runs just as if it was in Angular. So this is kind of how Scully works. Your users shouldn't know any difference other than the fact that your app loaded way, way, way faster. So I'm going to time this real quick. I'm going to turn this back to slow 4G, and I'm going to do a refresh on the home route. So here we go. 1,000, 2, 1,000. So we didn't really get much of a flash. The images took a while to load, but the JavaScript, actually, let's not do slow. That's too slow. Sorry, let's do a refresh. You notice the site didn't even like flicker away, like it stayed there for a proper amount of time. I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same test with just our Angular app, just so we can kind of see, hey, it did take significantly longer to load in Angular. So if we turn that to fast 4G and we do a refresh, notice we had that white page while the JavaScript all downloads. And eventually the JavaScript will finish downloading. Again, this is an unminified JavaScript bundle, so normally it wouldn't take this long. But then if after some time the website appears, this is a lot like what our websites appear in production for users on mobile, is that big white pause while the JavaScript queues up and downloads, and then the website just instantly appears. With Scully, notice it largely immediately appeared, and that's because the only thing it needed to download was just the pre-rendered HTML. Like once it downloaded the preloaded HTML, it could immediately show the site. Anyway, does anyone have any questions up to this point? I'm about to go into caching some of our API calls for these donut objects, but I wanted to pause and see if anyone had any questions before I keep going.
Yeah, I have like a bunch. I've been taking notes here. But
cool.
One of the things that I was thinking about was when you cached the API calls, you said it did 16 at a time because you had 16 cores. But
yeah.
when you're running this on a CI environment, you usually have like a single core.
Yeah. So, okay, so yeah. So Scully just says, hey, how many cores are on this machine? I'm going to use all of them to pre-render this app. So if you have a CI environment that has one core, it's going to pre-render one page at a time. That 20-second delay, your app won't have that 20-second delay. It's just some dumb configuration that I have in my Angular code. That I don't know what it is. I need to get rid of it though. Normally, even with one core, this should pre-render in like 10 or 15 seconds. It should be very, very fast. So yeah, that's kind of, but in a continuous integration environment, if you just have a single core, it will take some time. So some of our clients, they have a different CI environment for their Scully, just so they can pre-render their sites much quicker. So
okay.
So yeah, our one of our clients, one of her contacts, I showed you there. I showed you the difference in the performance on their website. Their build machines have always had 16 cores, and so it wasn't much of a change for them. But I do understand that some environments won't have that. Another thing that some of our clients are doing is some of them won't pre-render until they go to like QA or to staging. So they won't pre-render for like a PR build, and maybe they won't even they won't pre-render for like pre-QA builds either, integration environment type builds. But once they go to QA, then they'll start the pre-rendering from then on. So some people just kind of change their delivery lanes to account for adding an extra step for certain lanes to pre-render. But everyone's different.
Yeah. I have a bunch more, but I'll just take one more because I think it might be relevant for what's coming up next.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about the Json plugin that fetches the dynamic data from the API.
Yeah.
If I was going to use this at my client, I would have to be able to pass in custom headers on those API calls for JWT tokens and stuff like that.
Yep.
Is that possible in that plugin, or is it something I have to tweak?
Yeah, no. So it's really easy to author your own plugins, to be totally honest. Like I could have written that JSON plugin myself in about 3 or 4 lines of code. You can take the JSON plugin that's already built in, and you can call it inside of your own plugin. So you can use the JSON plugin inside of your own plugin and modify the headers. But if you need to modify your headers like very specifically, the cool thing about the plugin system is it's just a promise-based API. Like you don't have to learn GraphQL to integrate with it. You don't have to learn some new fancy technology. All you need to learn how to do is return a promise, and that promise has to eventually return like the parameterized routes. So you could write a very simple plugin that simply calls an API using node fetch. I use a node fetch for a lot of this stuff. Maybe you could use Axios, or maybe you already have a node library that can call it for you. Pass in your headers, get the data back, and then very easily parse that into an array of IDs that could then be given back to Scully to go into the parameter. So it's actually very, very simple to write these plugins. Even adding custom headers like that, you would just want to use something like node fetch or Axios to do that in Node. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So I've had demos in the past where we just write a node fetch, and it's very, very simple. But yeah. So if you I will take advantage of this opportunity to say to everybody, every Tuesday at noon Mountain Daylight Time, we have office hours where the whole core team is online, and you can jump on, ask us questions, and even you could do a screen share, and we can help with your project. If you want to learn more about that, if you just go follow us on Twitter at Scully.io, it's just at Scully.io. We kind of tweet every week, hey, here's our office hours is starting in a few minutes. Feel free to jump on and let's ask your questions. Every week we get 5 or 6 people showing up asking questions. Some people are just there to learn. Others are there for help with their projects. So yeah, feel free to take advantage of that if you have a ton more questions that I'm not able to answer today in this presentation.
I might take you up on that.
Yeah, good. Okay. If anyone else has any questions, or I'll just move on to the caching of the calls. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the caching of the calls. And for this part, I need to get into the Angular a little bit. So far, if you've noticed, I've been able to do all of this without having to touch Angular. So I haven't really modified our Angular app at all to do this stuff. That's why we're having the delay. It's because I didn't rebuild. Okay, sorry. Let's rebuild, and then we'll rerun our app, and everything will work fine. Sorry, I forgot that step. That's why it's taking 20 extra seconds.
Why do you need to rebuild, by the way?
Well, so the only reason you need to rebuild after installing is initially after you install, there's this new change where it brings in the schematic added the Scully lib module to your project, and I didn't build with that Scully lib module before telling Scully to run. So I should have done that. That was dumb of me. But now if I run, you can see that it pre-renders all of those sites really, really quickly. So if I just say npm on Scully, it will run much quicker than it did before. It'll just crunch through those URLs pretty quickly. So yeah, 4 seconds to do the whole build. So and that was because I didn't rebuild my JavaScript with that Scully lib module in there. That's what the delay was. Sorry, my bad. It was just the presentation jitters. Anyway, so now that we've solved that, but back to my point, I haven't modified Angular other than the schematic, adding this into my project. I've got all this pre-rendering goodness and like bootstrapping and Angular like goodness. I gotten all that for free. I actually haven't had to modify the Angular at all. So this is going to be our first change where we're actually going to bring Scully deeper into our Angular code. Up to this point, Scully's simply been on the outside optimizing without you really needing to fully embrace it. But if you do fully embrace it, then you can start to cache some of your calls, and that's where you can really start to save some money and some time and some security for your users. So if we go to our donuts component, and this is the component that that gets the donuts from the Scully from the API. If we look at this component, it's a very, very simple component. It just says, hey, donuts are equal to this HTTP call. Okay, so that's what donuts are equal to. It's equal to this observable, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. But there's a way where we can say, hey, if I'm in the build process, make the HTTP call and cache it. And if I'm in production, use the cached version that got cached during the build. And it's very simple to do that. Like we've tried our best to simplify this as much as possible. So let me show this. So I'm going to bring in transfer state. And this is a service called Scully. Actually, it's called the transfer state service. Okay, so we have this transfer state service, and I'm going to take this call out real quick, and I'm going to say donuts is equal to transfer state dot use Scully transfer state. So the use Scully transfer state is going to do, it needs two parameters. The first one is the name of the key that it's going to put it in the cache. So I'm just going to call this donuts. And the second thing is, hey, when I am running at the build time, where do I get these donuts to cache them? So I'm just going to give it back that observable that we already had in there. So I end up simply wrapping the observable I was already using inside of this use transfer state. Now what's going to happen is when I build this, behind the scenes, Scully is going to say, hey, am I in the Scully pre-rendering cycle? If I am, get these donuts, put them in the cache under a key called donuts. But also behind the scenes at runtime, out in production or out in QA, Scully is going to say, hey, I'm not at runtime. So don't make this call. Simply pull the cached value out of the Scully cache. Okay. So it's going to ship that value out with our indexed HTML, meaning that call, in order to get this data, users don't have to go all the way to our server. They can simply go to the same CDN where our app is cached. So that's going to be at least twice as fast. Like that's going to be very, very, very fast. So with that one line of code, well, I guess this is two, if you consider that I added it in the constructor. with that one change, I'm going to go ahead and rebuild my Angular. Give it a second. And then I'm going to redo a Scully build. Scully. Okay. So 4 seconds for that build. All right. So now I'm going to come back over here to our, sorry, I need to serve our Scully app. Scully serve. All right. So if we come over to the 1668, if we watch this app run, sorry, I'm going to turn the 3G off just to kind of speed this back up. So I'm going to do a refresh. And if we look for that donuts call, it actually didn't make any XHR to render this page. So if you notice before over here in the Angular version, if we look at XHR to render this page, sorry, let me turn the fast 3G off. Sorry. All right. If we refresh this, it does make the call to the API to get the donuts, but now in our Scully version, it doesn't make that call anymore. Okay. And that's because it cached these donuts. So these donuts got cached all inside of the API. Now, when I didn't cache, when I click on this detail route and go to the detail route, that call I actually didn't cache. Okay, so this flower mini did not get cached. All right, but I can attempt to cache it. So it's just one line of code that we're going to go ahead and cache this. So let's go in here. We'll go to our transfer state. We're going to go to the donut component now. Donut component, and we're going to do the exact same tricky line of code. We're just going to take this here. Let's bring in the transfer state. Transfer state service. Okay. And then we're just going to copy out this observable. And we're going to say transfer state dot use transfer state. On this one, I'm just going to call it donut instead of donuts. And then I'm going to give it that observable. Now, if I rebuild, and now if I reserve, come back over here and we refresh this flower page, you'll notice that, why is it still making...
You forgot the Scully before the serve. You have to run Scully, right?
I'm doing the Scully server right here. It's serving.
Yep. Don't you have to do npm run Scully before you do serve?
Oh, did I not? Oh, yeah, I did. Sorry. npm run Scully. My bad. Thank you. You're my co-presenter today.
No problem.
Softball me with the good questions. Okay. And now we'll go ahead and serve it. Good call. Now, if I come back over to the detail page and I do a full refresh on the details page, there's no XHR on that page. If I come back to the all donuts, no XHR on that page. So we've effectively eliminated the XHRs happening in our app by caching that data inside of the Scully cache. Now, one thing to note is when I go to this detail route, it actually makes a call for the name of the file with a data.json. Okay, so it did make a call to the server to get that data, but the difference is in where it made that call to. If you'll notice, the route that it made the call to is on port 1668. So it's making the same call as wherever my CDN data is hosted. Okay, so Scully put that API call into a data file, so that if I ever navigate to this page, it has the data needed for that route. How am I going to restate it? I need to cache the call for the initial page load, but also subsequent route changes as well. If I don't make a data.json, I don't get the data cached for subsequent route calls. I only get it for the initial route change, for the initial page load, but I want it for subsequent route changes. So every route it will cache the data into a data.json and also into the index.html. And so let me just show that real quick, just to kind of drive that point home. So if I were ever to go to this apple fritter page, it's going to cache the Scully. It's going to cache that where's my Scully cache? 1 second. Oh, sorry. Here's my Scully state where it cached it. It just caches it as kind of a global hard-coded object. This is what the Scully cache ends up looking like. Is it just caches that call into the HTMLs like hard-coded. But this will work if I ever navigate directly to this detailed page. But if I ever navigate from a different page to this page, I don't want to download the whole index.html. I only want to download the data, the cache for that page, the transfer state. So it puts a data.json for this route as well. And what that does is it allows me to have caching for all the API calls for every different route that I was on. And I don't have to cache all my calls. I can cache as many or as little as I want, meaning some pages will not let me cache any of the calls because maybe it's like a user profile page and there's no way to pre-render a user-specific page. But if it's a content page, I could pre-render all of those API calls. So like Scully is giving you the tools that you need to be able to carve up your app and make it as Jamstack and as efficient as possible. But again, I just showed you we brought Scully in, but we actually didn't bring it in that far. Like we've only put it in a couple of our layers for API calls. So Scully allows you to get like this huge amount of benefit from the Jamstack, from caching, from pre-rendering, from just embracing the CDN. And really that's the key here is you're optimizing your dev flow so that your runtime embraces the CDN. That's really what the point is here, so that your users immediately get as much content as possible with as little latency and data transfer as possible. So that's kind of the point here. But anyway, I could keep going. If anyone wants to have me real quick, we can add blog support to this app so that we could start to show some markdown, or I could stop and answer questions. What do you guys want me to do? I'll kind of customize this however you want me to. I'm going to stop for at least 1 minute and answer questions. So anyone who has a question, feel free to go.
Well, I mean, I have a bunch more, but I want to give everybody else some space.
Yeah, I'm the same. If anyone else has any questions, fine. But if not, Frederick and I will just he's my co-presenter today anyway, so we'll just keep going.
Hello, I have a question.
Okay.
So basically, if you start navigating before the JavaScript has loaded, so you're just going between static pages.
Yeah.
You like lose the instances of services that you have?
Yeah. So so that's a really good question. And let me say the question in a different way. If a user gets the pre-rendered page and they click on a link before the JavaScript is downloaded, what happens is kind of the question, if I understood you right.
Yeah.
And the answer is it just navigates to another static page. It doesn't actually do any JavaScript at that point. So, but because of that real important feature, a lot of Angular apps, they'll make a button that doesn't have an href on it. They'll make it navigate as with JavaScript. So they'll do something with like router.navigate by URL. If that's what your buttons are made out of, they're made out of, instead of router links, you're using JavaScript to navigate. Your pre-rendered app is not going to function very well for your users, and your users are actually going to be pretty frustrated that clicking on things doesn't do anything. And so in order to have an appropriately pre-rendered app and Jamstack app, you want your click targets, or your, some people call them call to actions. You want as many of your call to actions or your click targets to be hrefs. So a lot of projects will need to change the way that they code to more fully embrace the router link, so that they don't have to constantly deal with just dead links that don't work before it's pre-rendered. But For several of our clients, that change, switching over from JavaScript click reactions to router link click reactions, has been a very, very simple adjustment for most of the scenarios. Like I'll say 96, 97% of the scenarios, we were just routing because that's a bad habit, and it's been just teaching good habits, use the router link. But there are some where it does get a little bit difficult to navigate with a router link. So. And in those scenarios, you have to start to get creative and figure out what you're going to do. Maybe disable the button until until Angular has loaded. And so, if I could, because I just kind of delved into some, I want to show you 2 flags you get with Scully that also help you carve up your app. And maybe you pre-render certain parts and you don't pre-render other parts. So let me show you these 2 other tools. Let's go into our about route, and let's go into our about component, and we're just going to say show things equal to, and I have 2 flags here. I can say is Scully generated, and is Scully generated. This is going to be a flag that Scully will give me to say, hey, if Scully is generated, go ahead and this will be true. But if it's not generated, then don't do it. So let me put this into the content. So let's say I just want to hide this. I don't want to pre-render this list. So I'll say, hey, ngIf this show things. Okay, so now I need to do an Angular build, then we'll do a Scully build. Everyone already knows what this does in Angular. This is just an ngIf that if this is true, it will show it. If it's not, it will hide it, right? So now I'm going to do a Scully build real quick. And then we'll do a serve. Now, if I come over here, actually, let's go ahead and I actually don't need to serve it. If I come over to this about route and we format this, you'll notice that the UL isn't here anymore. So it actually turned off this. It turned off the unordered list. So in the pre-rendered version of my site, that list will no longer be there. But if I come over here and now that I'm serving this, if I come back over to the served version, the Angular at runtime, the is Scully is generated will return true. So at runtime, because it is generated at that point, I can say about, and it will show about. So if I turn this down like really slow, I want you to just see the difference. While the JavaScript is downloading, this list will not be there, but once the JavaScript loads, it will be there. So let me show you this. We'll refresh this. So the list is not there while the JavaScript downloads. And then once it's finished downloading and Angular bootstraps, it puts the list in there. So those are some more tools to help you carve up because you might want to not render certain parts of your page. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So that's another tool to kind of help you, and it kind of goes into that. Yeah, if people click on things and it does, and it's not ready to be clicked on, what do I do? Well, change your things to router links, but for the certain things that you can't change to router links, go ahead and just disable them using like a disabled the button class in Angular. So yeah. Anyway, any other questions? These are good questions. Frederick?
Yeah, but maybe I'll wait until
okay, cool.
do the blog then.
Let me do the blog, and then at the end, I'll let Frederick go crazy if no one else has questions. Okay. All right. So a lot of Angular projects. One of the things that motivated me to want to do Scully was that a lot of my friends were using React with GATS because they were like, Angular doesn't have a blogging solution. I was like, oh, that sucks. A lot of developers are moving over there just for that. I was like, that was kind of what I was like. That was one of the reasons why I started considering this. So Scully makes it really easy to add blog support. Okay, so we actually have a schematic for it. So if you say ng generate This is how you run the schematic in Angular. And we're going to say Scully IO. We're going to run that init again because that's our schematics. And we're just going to say init the blog. Okay. And this is going to go through and it's going to change my Angular app. It's going to make a route for it. It's going to give me my first blog markdown file. And it just kind of updates my project, gives me what I need to have blog support, modifies my Scully config so that Scully knows how to pre-render blogs now. And then it like I said, it put that route inside my app routing, and then it gave me my first blog. So if we come over to like my blog, here's what that looks like. Let's go ahead and pre-render this. So I'm going to change this to true because I want it to be published. We'll say Stockholm rocks Scully with Angular is fast. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to pre-render my site again with this blog as part of it. And one thing that's going to change is in my app module, my app router. Not that routing, app routing. It added this blog route. So now I actually have these blogs as a route that I can go to. I'm going to copy this because that's going to be our URL. So 1 second. So again, this changed a lot of my Angular code. So I need to do a full Angular build. Okay. I need to do a Scully build, npm run Scully. And we'll go ahead and we'll serve it. And you should notice that it rendered somewhere up here. We should see a blog route that got rendered somewhere if we're lucky, unless I'm crazy. And it's trying to make a fool out of me because I'm presenting. Did it do it? No, it didn't do it. Maybe we need to do scan routes. Thought to rescan for the routes. Oh yeah, it found the files. Okay, cool. So that time, did it find the blog? Okay, for some reason the blog's taking a long time. This whole hold up right here is for the blog, and I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. Sorry. I think you need to do npm Scully watch in order to make this work. Yeah, you do. So it's it needs the Scully watch server in order to get that data out of the local server. Anyway, so at this point, if I come over to my pre-rendered assets, we do have this blog pre-rendered. If we come in here, look at it, you've got, where's my blog at up here? Where are you at, blog? Stockholm rocks, Scully with Angular is fast. And if I come over to the /blog/ there we go. So it goes ahead and it pre-renders that for us. So yeah, let me turn this back on to fast. So yeah, that is how you can add. It's as simple as adding blog support. With the blog service, you get a couple of new things going on. Like you have this Scully route service that you can bring into your project that will essentially give you all the lists. It will give you all the routes in your app, so you can start to list out the different blogs. Let me show you that real quick. As part of the Scully build, it kind of enumerates all the routes in your project. So you can kind of go through them and say, hey, which of those are my blogs? what's the title on the blog, what's the description, is it published, what's the source file, like, so I can start to add metadata to my blogs as well. But this is so that you could build like a table of contents or something for your website as well, using that data. So anyway, there's quite a few tools coming out of the box with Scully. If anyone has any questions, wants to learn more, Scully.io is our website. This is our docs. If you can kind of walk through our getting started guide to kind of get going with this stuff. And then you've got, we have kind of a getting started guide, but then we kind of have our full docs as well. If you want to learn about plugins, the JSON plugin itself, writing new plugins that you need to use. This is kind of a good resource for you to kind of get started, dive in and learn about the different plugins. It talks about a code of conduct for our use when you're interacting with the Scully community. It has linked to our Gitter, where you can ask live questions to not just the core team, but the entire community of developers that are using Scully. A lot of them are small developers, meaning they're at small companies. Lots of them are enterprise, embracing Jamstack. So a lot of good people can answer your questions there, as well as our office hours every Tuesday at noon. You can click on that link and join. But yeah, that's a lot. There's more coming in the next few years. Scully will be fully, it'll be a full-on startup with venture capital, and it will be here to stay. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show off today. So now I guess we're in full-blown question mode.
I'll just wait a bit.
Okay. Everyone's scrolling through their Twitter. I lost him.
Aaron, I have a question.
Yeah.
When Scully rendered the page, is there a risk, or let me put it that way, is how can we make sure that Angular is not trying to load the same page again?
So Angular does load the same page again.
Or could it happen? Or?
Well, let me explain how the Jamstack works for JavaScript websites. So this is true for React. This is true for Angular. This is true for Vue. This is true for any JavaScript site that's using a pre-rendered solution. What happens is the user gets the pre-rendered HTML, and then when the JavaScript downloads, Angular specifically, let me kind of walk you through the code. The user will download. Let's just say they go to the home route, and they'll get all these donuts that are in here. Like if we come through the home route, there's tons of donuts. Like this is a big HTML page, right? Our home route. The user will get that, and then what happens though is when Angular downloads, Angular says, "Hey, I'm gonna bootstrap that one component." And when it bootstraps the app root goes, "Hey, I don't know what any of this HTML is. Like, I'm not supposed to have anything in me when I start." So Angular will delete this, all of it. It deletes everything inside of the app root. Okay. So the HTML actually ends up disappearing real quick. And then Angular, as it bootstraps, it repaints all of this internal HTML at runtime. So some people are like, "Wow, that's not very efficient." Like they saw it already, and then Angular deleted it and then showed it back up again. That's just how pre-rendering with JavaScript works. It's kind of wonky and not fun. So there's a lot of ways, a lot more advanced topics that we could talk about on how to not re-render everything. And but that's largely how this works. And this isn't an Angular limitation. This happens with React as well. This happens with Vue. If there's other JavaScript pre-rendering solutions out there, it happens with those frameworks. So yeah. Okay. So there's no way to prevent it from pre-rendering. I will say this though, like my website works without Angular. I don't really actually need Angular for my website to work. So there is a Scully plugin to where I can completely remove Angular from my website. So I could actually come into here and I'm trying to remember the guy who built it. Let me pull it up on my. Can you guys see my desktop?
Yep.
Yeah.
Scully disable Angular plugin. Yeah. So out here on NPM, this guy Sam, he's from the Netherlands. He built this Scully plugin disable Angular. Sorry, this is the right one. Yeah. And this one simply, it will remove the Angular script tags from the bottom of your site. So if we came over to my pre-rendered page again, static index.html, at the very bottom, it's got these links that disable Angular. It will go ahead and just delete those as part of the Scully build. And then your website can just exist as a static page without any Angular runtimes.
Right.
So you can do that, but as far as preventing Angular from running and deleting everything and repainting it, that's just part of the necessary life cycle of this stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
These are all questions that I had as well when I started to build this thing. When we started to build it, I had no idea. So next question.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about when you have something behind a guard, say a login page or something behind a login page. What happens? Yeah. How does Scully handle that?
So let's kind of walk through what would happen. I want you to imagine that the pre-render process, it sees the route that has like a login guard in front of it, right? Because it scanned your Angular project and found that route. And so it went to pre-render that route. And when it pre-rendered it, what would Angular have showed it? It would have showed it the login modal, right?
Yep.
So that's what's going to get pre-rendered is your login modal, which is totally fine. You may want to, for those specific routes, you may want to use that is Scully generated thing to not show the modal. Just maybe just kind of paint like the headers, the footers, the sidebars, but leave the middle of the page empty, right? Mm. And it just kind of depends on how you want to carve up those guarded routes. Like every app's going to be
redirect, right?
Yeah. Well, if you have a redirect, then it would Scully's going to pre-render whatever it got redirected to.
Okay.
So yeah, but those are the kind of things that you have to consider in every app because every app's so like vastly distinct and different that that's why we're giving you those tools like is Scully running, is Scully generated, so that you can turn different pieces on and off during different steps of the life cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another one I had was about the Scully server.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, like, what's the difference between the Scully server and something like the Light server that John Papa built? It just hosts static content.
So that's a good question. You could use Light. Here's why the Scully server is pretty powerful. A lot of people, when they use the Angular CLI and they do ng-serve locally, a lot of people, I've done this on a lot of clients, will add in proxy support to that, and we'll add in support for certificates, and we'll add in like other types of support that exist in like the Webpack dev server. And John Papa's server may have all that same support, but I haven't used his server. But when you're building locally with ng-serve and you have proxy support and search support and all this other stuff, we knew that in order to test your Scully build, you were also going to need proxy support and search support. So the Scully server has support for all the same command line options that that you get with the Angular CLI serve. And so we just needed to make sure we had as many tools for Angular developers that are exploiting all the different options in the CLI. We needed to make sure they had those same options in the Scully dev server as well. So that's kind of the advantage. If you don't have any of those, requirements like proxies or certs or anything, then there's probably not much advantage to using the Scully server, other than that it will host your ng build static files and the Scully files. It kind of launches two servers in one, but other than that, there's probably not a huge benefit between that and using what John Papa wrote.
Um,
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you guys can see me as I answer these questions.
I have more, but I'll wait a bit.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, yeah, let's see if, sorry. If anyone else has anything, I suppose maybe raise your hand. And we'll get to you. What does it look like when someone raises their hand? Oh, yeah. So yeah, if you click the raise your hand button, I'll see it. But until someone else raises their hand, I guess just go, Frederick.
So I have a bunch of apps in a monorepo with NX.
Yep.
And I was thinking about the schematic when it updates the app module and stuff like that. How does the built-in schematic handle NX? Do I have to do things manually, or can I use it?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. When you install it for the first of your many apps in your workspace, the schematic will just run and say which one, and then it will configure one of your apps. Then if you wanted to add Scully for another one of your apps in your monorepo, you kind of have to do some copy and pasting of that part. The schematic doesn't add it to the second or the third or the nth project. We have most of the changes ready for that, but we don't. That schematic has, like, that update to the NX schematic hasn't been released yet. So yeah, you'll get the first one really easy, but adding Scully support for your second one, you're gonna have to do some copy and pasting. But you'll see it's not too wildly difficult. Like if you look at what files got changed when you added it to the first one, you're just gonna have to manually make those changes. Again, the PR where we make this fix to where the schematic will support all the projects in an NX repo, that may fall in the next few weeks. So maybe keep your eyes open. But until then, with NX, Scully is good at adding it to the first one, but not the second or the third or the fourth. Like it's really only good for the first one, unfortunately. But that's a good question.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So we're aware of it and we're fixing it, but we don't have that fix out yet.
Right.
Hey, more questions? There's no hands up, so Freddie, if you have more questions, feel free.
Okay. I was just thinking about really like a detailed stuff, but the heading that was generated when you added the blog, it was an H1. But if you have in the app component, like the wrapper, you have an H1 in there, will the blog component identify that?
No. So the blog, like imagine if I put the header inside of the component, the Angular component. So let me kind of digress. Let me try to show what happened with the blog. So if we open up my app, we open up the blog module, we kind of open up this blog component.
We don't see your screen right now.
Oh, sorry. Good call. Share screen. Share this one. Okay. See now?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay.
It's loading, I think. There we go.
Very cool. So this is what the blog page looks like. It has the Scully content on here. And then it just does this Scully content, and the Scully build puts your generated markdown inside of this thing. That's kind of what the magic of Scully is. It will take your markdown and put it in there for you. And then you can have Angular stuff here, you can have Angular stuff here, and then your pre-rendered markdown will go inside of there. So if your H1 is out here in Angular land, you don't have to. You just would not put it inside your blog. So up in my blog, I would just not have that necessarily. Like, I don't know. You don't have to do that at all, but you have the control to do whatever you need with that. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm answering your question very good, but
I was thinking about like the alley part of things where you have a structure to things. So if you have an H3, you have before you need Stockholm rocks to be an H4 if it's nested in the header structure.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, the way that things work with Markdown, if you need Stockholm rocks to be an H4, You just have to decorate it as such. Like that's just how it works, unfortunately. But yeah, it doesn't. I mean, like with Markdown, if I just do a bunch of these, like they're all going to be H1s. Markdown's not smart enough to make these H4s or whatever. So, is it? I'm pretty sure that's true. What I said.
I think that's true as well. I was just thinking about since the Markdown gets converted somewhere along the line. In theory, it could just check what is already rendered in the page before it injects the new HTML, and then use that as a baseline for parsing the Markdown. But that would be tricky.
Yeah, it would be tricky. We're trying to keep this as unintrusive as possible. However, I'll take advantage of this opportunity to say there's another type of plugin you can make with Scully, and it's so I showed you the JSON one where we helped Scully discover routes. That's called a router plugin. There's a post renderer plugin where you get the output of the page and you can modify it however you want. So if you wanted to write your own post renderer that says, hey, for my blog pieces, if there was already a header, remove this, or add meta tags, or whatever you want, you have full control over the output from Scully to remove and add extra pieces. So that's another type of plugin we didn't really talk about, is the post renderer plugin, where you can modify the pre-generated HTML to be different somehow. And there's a lot of use cases where you're going to want to do that. So yeah. Once you play around with it, it'll make sense pretty quick, I promise.